Well, I think we can start. Chris, what do you think?
Please, yes.
Perfect. So hello, everybody. I'm Andrea Rurali from Bocconi University. I'm a professor of marketing and I direct a master in arts management. Welcome to this webinar dedicated to tourism and COVID-19, Lesson from Leading Museum, a webinar organized together with the advisory board for the art. Please,
Good
Chris.
morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I am Chris Denby. I'm founder and chief executive officer of the advisory board for the arts, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this very, very important and I think will be fascinating conversation across the next 90 minutes. Just to kick us off from a logistical standpoint, you will have noticed that we are recording this session. We're recording it so that we can make it available to you and your colleagues afterwards. It will be posted on our website. We will be creating a summary of the session as well, and that will be sent around to you directly. So please note that it will be there and available for everyone to see and have and distribute if you would like. Just a quick notice to logistics as well. We have a huge number of participants on today's session. We're expecting 400 plus individuals. And as such, we're going to keep all of your videos off and your microphones muted, and which means that we would primarily ask that you participate in this session through the chat function. We will be taking your questions across the course of the 90 minutes, and we would ask that you put these questions into the chat room at any time, and we will try to address as many of them as possible across the time that we have together. With that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the Advisory Board for the Arts, just for those who are less familiar with it. We are a research-based company that literally just started 9 months ago. So we are very much new to the world of the arts. We are built on a model that was working for the last 30, 40 years in healthcare and education, and have been migrating this model now to the world of the arts. The entire concept of what we do is to partner with arts organizations all across the world to provide them with breakthrough research on the issues that they deal with the most complex issues that they deal with every day. What is here today is part of a series that we started back in March to help arts organizations through the issues of COVID-19 and the crisis. We've been hosting free weekly webinars on different issues pertaining to the crisis. And there have been now quite a number of them, and you are welcome to go and visit our website at advisoryarts.com to see any of the previous webinars that we have held. This is the second one that we have done in this series in collaboration with Bocconi, and it's been an extraordinary experience, and I think today will prove that it is yet another one. So with that, I wanted to turn it back over to Andrea.
Thank you, Chris. Well, for the Italian, probably they already know who is Bocconi. Bocconi is a university where there is a business school, and in this business school, we deal with different type of courses dedicated to the arts management. One organized together with the Southwestern University in Dallas and HSM Montreal, which is the MIAM. We have a program that is organized in India, in Bombay, where we have another headquarter of the Bocconi School of Management, and also the MAMA program, which is the one that I actually direct. All together inside this Arts and Culture Knowledge Center that allow us and also the students to be in contact with the different cultural institutions in Italy and also in the world. Well, Bocconi is a university that has this business school that is ranked under the most important ranking aspect and list of Financial Times, Bloomberg, and Economist. And for us, exploring the implication of management into the arts field is something that is requiring and getting a lot of effort, and we are very satisfied of what we achieved, and we are achieving with so many cultural institutions that are partnering with us, among the others, particularly the Vatican Museum, the Uffizi, and hopefully the National Gallery of Art, and many others again. Go on, Chris, with the audience.
We just want to take a minute to welcome the very, very diverse group that we have on our webinar today. This is to give you a little bit of a sense of the organizations that are represented by the folks who are on this Zoom at the moment. We also are tremendously excited to have a large number of students who are participating in this session, who I think are fascinated to learn more about what is going on in the world of the arts with, you know, three of the greatest leaders in the field of museums from across the world. What I would take away from this list is the geographic diversity that is represented. We literally have people from all over the world here, and so I want to thank you for joining us and participating. As Andrea mentioned, there are a number of moments in this 90 minutes in which we will be doing a little bit of polling with all of you to get a sense for the feelings of people. And just to get us to practice this, we're going to put up a poll here just to get a little bit of a better sense for the mix of individuals who are joining us today. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to take this poll and let us know who you are. It'll give us, and we'll show you the results in just a second, just to give you a little bit of a sense again for the diversity of the group that we have with us at this moment. So I see that everyone's quite adept at doing these polls. The numbers are going up pretty quickly. So I'd say in a few seconds, we'll show you sort of the mix that we have. Let's take a second here to finalize the answers we have from our group so far. Take a few more seconds. I think everyone's quite adept now with this whole Zoom technology and its various aspects. Fortunately and unfortunately, right? So Karen, I think we can share the results now just to show the group a little bit of the sense. We have, as mentioned, you know, a lot of students with us, a lot of people from the museum world and the performing arts world, and then a lot of others. So the others will have to reveal themselves across the next 90 minutes and give us a sense for who they are. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrea to get us going.
Yes, thank you. Now is the time to know who actually are the panelists of this great webinar. We have Kevin Feldman, the director of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., Barbara Iatta, the director of the Vatican Museum, and Heike Schmidt, the director of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. I will immediately leave the floor to them, asking them to introduce themselves and particularly the relation, the identity card of the museum that they are directing. So how many visitors or how many employees. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. We can start with Kevin.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm very impressed with the global representation here. I am the director of the National Gallery of Art. I have been here for just a little bit over a year, and I actually celebrated my first year anniversary, and 2 days later we closed to the staff and public because of the pandemic. So it's been an interesting first year. The National Gallery of Art is, of course, the youngest museum that is on this panel right now. We were founded in 1941, and with a remarkable story of the philanthropist Andrew Mellon offering the nation a national gallery. He helped fund our first building and donated the initial collection of the National Gallery of Art. So we are a young museum. And we have about 4.5 million visitors a year. And we have 1,200 employees and a budget of about $200 million each year. And we're a unique institution in America in that we are a federal institution. So most of our funding comes from the government. And we have a very, very small board of directors. We have 5 private trustees and 4 public trustees. So it's a different kind of organization amongst the field of American museums. I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. Barbara Iatta, it's your turn. Thank you.
Ladies first. Thank you. I'm Barbara Iatta. I'm director of the Vatican Museum since almost 3.5 years. I was 6 months deputy director from exactly 4 years ago. It was June the 7th when I took position there, and we are probably one of the oldest institutions in terms of museum or collection of art. We can date the date 1506 is the date in which we consider the starting of our papal collections, thanks to Julius II de la Rovere, that established a collection of ancient statues, specifically the Laocoon and others, on the top of the hill, Vatican Hill, the Colle di Sant'Egidio. And since that time, so since 1506, the collection has been increased, but turned into a concept of museums only in mid-19th century, when from the Vatican Library collections, they started to build 2 major museums. And since then, it started to be more and more museums. So we call Vatican museums in plural because it's a complex of different museums going from the Egyptian and the Thracian museum, so the pre-Roman civilization, up to the contemporary art, passing through a great Renaissance collections in terms of not only collections of paintings and sculpture, but also frescoes, so the palace itself. We have more or less 760 employees that arrived to almost 1,000. So we are very, not very numbered comparing to other institutions, comparing to other like the National Gallery or the Louvre. We have 7 miles of museum, of exhibition space. And last year we closed 2019 with 6,800,000, so nearly 7 million visitors. And then in 2020, the great year of the celebration of the 500 year of Raphael, the pandemic arrived, and then here we are.
Thank you, Barbara. And now Heike Schmidt, the director of the Uffizi Galleries in Florence. Thank you, Heike.
Hello, thank you, Andrea. I've been director of the Uffizi Galleries, and again, it's plural, just like the Vatican Museums, because it's a series of several different museums. Since 2015, the museum, the collections were started in the 1440s, 1450s. So in a way, we are probably the oldest museum of this group. Our first mission statement was written in 1737, and since 1769 we're open to the public. So we celebrated that last year, 250 years of being a museum in the modern terms of according to the modern concept of an institution that collects, that exhibits, that conserves, that promotes research and carries out research and educates as well through the collection. We have approximately between 4.5 million visitors in a normal year, but this year it will be much, much less for sure. We've been growing also over the past 4 years, but this year it will be a decrease, no doubt about that. In terms of employees, there are about 400 government employees plus 120 employees through a government-controlled company, plus approximately 350 permanent contractors on site. So in terms of our employees, we're probably rather similar to the Vatican Museums.
Thank you, Heike. You gave us the opportunity to enter in the first question that we actually prepared, which is to describe actually the state of the art at the moment in the museum. So after, or during or after, depending on the perspective we adopt, the COVID crisis. If it is closed, when it's going to be reopened, if you have a kind of forecast of the decrease of visitors and going on. So, Kaiwin.
Yes, so we are currently closed to the public and to the staff, and we have our staff working from home for the most part. And we are hoping that we will be able to open our sculpture garden on June 20th, and then one of our buildings, the West Building, in early July. We're just starting to see the numbers of COVID cases in Washington, D.C. decrease, although we had an uptick yesterday, and I suspect that with all of the protests and sort of reopening plans that we're going to see another uptick. So I am not convinced that we'll be able to stick to our plans, but we're hoping to reopen within the next month or so.
Thank you. Barbara, what happened in the Vatican Museum? You opened yesterday, right?
No, we open on Monday, so
Monday.
the 1st of June, and it was an amazing reopening because we were not expecting so many visitors, but in fact we had quite a number on Monday and yesterday. That was an Italian national feast, but not a Vatican feast. We had the sold out, we can say, for this moment, because we have extended our opening hours to 10 hours and to 12 hours during the weekends, Friday and Saturdays. But we have imposed the 100 people per quarter of an hour. So by the entire day, we cannot accept more than at least around 4,000 people. And yesterday we arrived on the 2nd of June, we arrived to 3,600 people. Today, I don't know, I don't have the report yet because visitors can only book online. They have a little discount because we do not charge the €4 of pre-booking online, and so there is a convenience. And I can announce even now that we have since next week another nice opportunity. All the doctors and the sanitary infermieri, I don't know how to say that in English, I don't remember. Okay, can become for free with the person for 2 weeks. They can do that not only in the Vatican Museum but also in the Castel Gandolfo for the Holy See. The Holy See will press office will say that probably in the time we are talking.
Great. What's happening instead in the Uffizi, Heike?
Well, we reopened today. We had a ceremony this morning with the Archbishop of Florence, the Rabbi of Florence, and the Imam of Florence, together with the Mayor of Florence, and then the Prefect, which is the highest government representative of the central government on the local territory, and head of the police forces, of course, and then also the Prime Minister of the Regional Council of Tuscany present. So this happened this morning, and now there are literally hundreds and hundreds of people who flocked into the galleries. I interrupted, well, elbow bumps because we can't really shake hands, but for this seminar, I went out of that. So this is what happened in the Uffizi, but we have already opened the Pitti Palace 1 week ago. Since until today, interregional travel in Italy was not permitted. We only had locals in the museum, and I think this is a very, very rare opportunity. We had visitor numbers at the Pitti Palace of about 100 people per day, which is just like in the old days when Nathaniel Hawthorne lived in Florence and wrote parts of the Scarlet Letter there with the same kinds of numbers, and Dostoevsky also So it's a little bit that atmosphere. I think we will be getting much less numbers at the Uffizi as well compared to previous years. We are really catapulted back at least half a century, but from a certain standpoint, even more than 1 century into the 19th century.
Thank you. This is, it's great to hear these different perspectives from the three of you as to where things stand, and congratulations to Barbara and Ike for reopening this week. I can only imagine the excitement and jealousy on this Zoom from other arts organizations around the world who just can't wait to be in that place, hopefully very soon, to be able to get visitors again, to see audiences. And before we go on, I just want to remind everybody on this who's participating to please start asking questions directly to our guest speakers, to the group as a whole through the chat function. And as we get questions, we will pepper them to the group across the time we have together. Again, want to welcome the fantastic diversity of individuals we have, and please keep introducing yourselves if you would like. I've seen folks from Mexico and Brazil and Taiwan and China. It's just extraordinary, the variety of folks that we have on. At the end of the day, we're all interested in getting back to arts, getting back and getting our audiences and visitors back, as many as possible, and ideally as much as we had before, if not more. And one of the things that we have seen every arts organization leader think about and try to forecast in their mind is, when will people come back? When it is actually possible, will they come back in the numbers that we were expecting, or are things going to be very different? We thought it'd be fun to just ask this group of 400 or so individuals, as individuals, not as professionals in the arts, when are you going back to museums? Are you expecting you'll be going back to a museum in the next month? Do you think you'll wait 6 months? Do you think you'll wait a year? Perhaps other than your own, if you're working in your own museum, just to get a little bit of a sense. So curious to know how eager people are to get back out there, despite the legitimate, perhaps ongoing health concerns or, issues that we have. So take a minute to answer that question. For you and your families, what are your personal plans? Do you expect to get back out there as soon as possible? Clearly not a very scientific group here, since I think we have a biased group of individuals who are art lovers on this call, but still fun to see what people's thinking is in terms of getting back out there. Because at the end of the day, whatever capacity we are given in terms of opening, whether it's 30% or 20% or however it's measured, one of our big questions is, will we be able to fill that capacity right away? And I'll turn to our panelists for that in a second, but Karen, let's take a look at what our participants are saying. So the vast majority, good news, are saying we'll be back. 1 to 3 months for sure. I'm planning to go visit a museum again with my family. And some folks a little bit more cautious, 3 to 6 months, and others saying, it'll probably be 6 to 12 months. But perhaps a somewhat optimistic picture here that within a year, maybe the majority of folks will be back to where they were. So that's what I want to ask the three of you, if you don't mind. You may have actually gone through some fairly, complicated forecasting of your own. When are you expecting, what is your forecast as to how much of your audience will be coming back? And clearly, whatever it is, it's still going to be a very challenging, at least year financially, and challenging road ahead. So we're particularly curious about how are you going to quote unquote survive? How do you get through such a difficult year ahead, whether it be because of audiences coming back or not coming back, whether it's because of the economic conditions of each of our different countries? What have you had to do differently from a strategy standpoint to prepare yourself to get through the next 12 to 18 months? Maybe Barbara, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. Probably we have the most challenged task, because we are a national museums in some way, but we, on an opposite side from many other national museums, we are not financed by the state, the tiniest state in the world, 44 hectares, but we do finance the state with our income. So it's an opposite situation. Our major problem is the loss of incomes for sure in carry on, not only the employees, but all what is concerning the running of the museums in terms of everything, restoration and all the organization. And so we are very concerned about the losing, and we of course we are happy we are happy of the numbers of these days, but we also are making comparison of how in the same time of the year we were in the last years, and it's a tenth of what, not a tenth, but in June we were settled on a range of 25,000 visitors per day, and so and now the range of the next days will be 2,000, 3,000 hopefully, but so it's 1 to 10. So it's for sure it's a complex. I want to think positive. I want to think in a better situation. That's why we are trying to we have organized also some tours of the Vatican Gardens, not entering by the entrance of the museum. So there is a different offer to our visitors, more than before. We are extended the opening hours so to have more people coming, and we have also tried to have 2 opening evenings during the weekend, so that working people can be easily. The rest, it depends on Italian government decisions, because and other countries, because of course 60 or 70% of our visitors before the COVID were foreigners, not Italians, not Romans, and so we are, of course, from today, as Heike mentioned, the different regions of Italy have opened the doors to the others, and so it will be easier to have visitors coming from other regions of Italy, and it depends on when exactly other countries will open the doors to come in security and freedom. And as we can see, even from the graphic you are posting of the people that are joining our meeting, our webinar, even people interested in this meeting, some of them are thinking to go back to museum in 3-6 months or 6 months or a year. So even people that are interested in watching this webinar are thinking to take their time, probably because they live in countries where still the COVID is active so much more than what it's Italy now. Probably in Washington DC, they are in a worse situation that we are. And oh, sorry. But I can tell you that we try to think positive. We try to, but we are looking probably in a couple of years, even more of the time to come back to the pre-COVID situation.
Thank you. Let's travel a couple hours north. Heike, how are you doing across the next year? What are you doing that is different, perhaps from a strategy standpoint, to be able to make it through what will likely be the toughest 12 months ahead?
Yes, we are in a very similar situation to the Vatican museums. We're totally self-financed. We've also financed the government rather than receiving monies from the government, and therefore, but not just that. Normally we spend about 25% of our revenue helping other museums. We made an agreement with several museums, smaller museums that wouldn't be able to survive alone. And now that we don't have this income, we cannot help them. So they will need to be financed directly by the government. Whether we need some additional financing this year around from the government rather than paying them is still open. We don't know that yet. Sanitation procedures cost about 6 million euros per year should they remain in place for the next 12 months. Of course, this is a cost that needs to be considered. We have made all the investments in the technology in this area, but of course, for sanitation gel or so, that these are running costs, or masks, surgical masks, or other types of masks. These are costs that are going on top of the normal budget. We've already lost 12 million euros, which is about 1/3 of our operating budget in these 3 months of closure. So at the moment, we are able to keep everything stable just by postponing some of the building projects and slowing some others down a little bit. We will not need to lay off staff, and if we are able to go back to even just 20% of our visitors, and I should add that, I mean, we kept on even the contractors. So I mean, it's not obviously about the government employees that continue to be paid, but it's especially about contractors. We will be able to keep them all on as we have during the time of the closure. In fact, museum educators, for instance, that normally would have had groups of children, groups of different disabled people, they instead worked on online communication and offered online content for children, and we will carry on with that. In terms of our visitorship, I would hope, in terms of the type of museum visits also, I would hope that we would not get back to where we were before, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of the kinds of visits that oftentimes we experienced, with people coming in tour buses, rushing to 2 or 3 of the main attractions, taking photographs there and rushing out again. This is a kind of tourism that we have started to discourage a little bit even before the Corona crisis, by adding a large group fee, for instance, for people who come with more than 15 people, and that has helped us a lot. And I think this will, we should really use this crisis to promote a more sustainable way of tourism and of museum visits, less travels, but more intensive, more alert, and also giving people additional materials in their hand, especially immaterial materials through online content that can be used in the galleries as well. So, for instance, we've started to do 3D scans of all of our ancient sculptures, which is very helpful, not just for those people who are not in the museum, who maybe write a thesis, do some research in Japan or in Australia, but also in the museum, because you can't walk around those statues that have their back to the walls. And so this is available through people's cell phones now, and you can get additional information. If the label is not enough, you can just go down several different types of layers of information, and you can also get short videos, which we release every single day if you prefer that. And also we put in literally hundreds of benches, so people can actually sit down before the artwork and have a much more in-depth experience.
Right. That's terrific. Thank you. And I very much appreciate your point around trying to think about this as an opportunity as well, perhaps to reshape the audience, to reshape the experience of people coming through. That's certainly one thing we hear from leaders of arts organizations all around the world, is this desire to want to look at this in a positive light as well, in terms of opportunity to reshape, to rethink. Kaywin, I'd like to turn to you now with the same question. What is your plan for making it through the next 12 months? What are you most worried about, and what are you doing differently in order to make it through the most difficult period?
Well, I'm actually trying to make it through today. I just had to mute my microphone because we have a march of protesters outside of our building heading up to the Capitol. So it is, of course, a really painful and difficult time in America right now. I actually am nostalgic for the days when we only had the COVID crisis to deal with. We are projecting to have about a third of our attendance that comes back between now and the end of the a third of our usual attendance between now and the end of the calendar year. And it's a combination of course, having fewer people who want to go to museums, not having tourists. And then, of course, we have to limit the number of people that we can bring in the building for physical distancing and according to Washington, D.C. rules. Like everybody, we're trying to learn as quickly as we can, and with great interest, we look at the advice and the numbers we hear about from colleagues across the world, and have heard about museums in China being oversubscribed and people really excited to come back to museums, to other stories of a fraction of normal visitation. So we will be ready for both scenarios, but again, having our numbers limited. I will mention a study that was just done, or they're in the process of releasing it, by an organization called Culture Track. And I don't know if our participants are familiar with it. I highly recommend it. You can just Google Culture Track. It's a study that a company called La Placa Cohen does every few years in America to try to understand audience behavior with regards to the arts in general. And so they did a study very quickly to see about Americans' readiness to go back to museums and performing arts centers. They had 130,000 responses total, 30,000 responses from art museums. The thing to keep in mind is that they sent out their survey to names that are already in the databases of art museums. And so already your audience is not the general audience, it's not the whole public, it's people who either donate to museums or come regularly so much that they're in the email databases of museums. And of that study, half of the people said they wouldn't come back over the next 6 months. So those are people who are arts lovers, are hesitant. So we still think that our number of 30% is probably just about the right one once we do reopen. For us, there is not actually a financial impact of being closed to the public. The National Gallery of Art, because we're funded by the taxpayers, we don't charge for anything. We don't charge for lectures or films or concerts, exhibitions, general admission. Everything here is free. And we don't make money on stores and restaurants. It's just a service that we provide. So it's not the financial impact for us.
Thank you, Kaywin. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrea for a second. Thank you for actually mentioning that survey, because the Advisory Board for the Arts was one of the partners we worked with La Placa Cohen and Slover Lynette on this. And in fact, for those who are interested, our very next webinar in 2 weeks will be to talk about the results of that study. And so we invite you to join us 2 weeks from today to do that. Andrea?
Thank you. Well, we can go back to the connection between the city where you are, or actually the area in the case of the Vatican actually is in the Vatican state, but the general consideration is very connected and inside the tourism activity in Rome. The relation between tourism and the museum, because the size of the museum, the importance of the museum, the number of visitors that you get every year bring us to ask if in a situation where the tourism will be down for a while, if you, as director of these three important museums, can have a sort of impact yourself in the organization that you are working in order to increase or maximizing your audience over the next year. If you are actually already doing something, I can in a way already talk about the kind of visitor that he's about to expect for that. Or you are simply waiting. Well, it's not the case, but you can, in a passive way, waiting for the tourists to come back and therefore attract those tourists, or in a situation like this, acting in a proactive way in order to maximize the number of the visitor of your museum. I also ask now, Karen, if you can start our next poll that is connected with this topic. If you launch it, I can go through and read the question for the participant. That is mainly for the part of an art organization that depends in part on tourists, how long it will take for 100% of your pre-COVID audience to return to your organization. Because sometimes we consider the lockdown a period that is start in February, will finish in July, and in August going back to the ordinary life. But we have learned in this past weeks that the consequence of this lockdown will be very, very long. And at the moment, we can also share the result of the poll now, saying that half of the people that is participating to this webinar and there are actively involved in the organization of museum say that it will take 1 or 2 years to have the original numbers back in the ordinary life. So what are you doing in this? We can, Barbara, if you want to start.
Sure. I think that in some way in the lockdown time, we have worked so much on the web, and this I agree with Eike, because we share already these ideas in terms of presenting but via web and all the different possibility of the museum virtually. But if the virtual impact of the museum was the great winner of the lockdown time, it will never substitute the real visit. So we are working strongly, and we did strongly work a lot in giving something more in the reopening time. And so we worked in the last months to present what we were supposed to do for the great celebration of Raphael. And so we worked on the finishing of the project of restoration of the Constantine Hall and of the new display of the room 8, that is the room of the painting gallery devoted to Raphael. So Raphael is a great challenge of this reopening, and we are thinking maybe to have another exhibition on 2 of his major works together with Fra Bartolomeo that will never be exposed. So to try to bring more visitors to come to see and to come to visit us. But at the meantime, we are working, of course, with the educational projects, always related not only to Raphael but to the collection itself, through the web and through the educational department itself. I think we do agree with all the curators that major exhibitions in this year and probably in the next 6 months of the next year are in a way frozen, suspended for the moment, because it's too dangerous and too complex to organize exhibitions that involve not only economically a large amount of money, but also that are probably more dangerous to the traveling couriers and what is concerning organizing major exhibitions. So we as museums, as Vatican Museum, we are strongly working on the collections, on our collections, and trying to promote our collection instead. That by the contrary, we already have 2 exhibitions already prepared, already one in the Braccio di Carlo Magno devoted to Previati, which is a great artist of the beginning of 20th century, and we will probably do next year, but it's already done. All the displays already done, and another one devoted to Folon inside the galleries, and even that one we will probably do not this year. 2020 will be off of the exhibitions, because we think, apart from the expense of and the problems of having couriers traveling, is that we will not have enough public to justify an effort of organizing major exhibition like this too. So we are now maybe only thinking to focusing on Raphael, and maybe in the fall, maybe with Eike also in collaboration, we will have another, but this will come.
Thank you, Barbara. We can pass the floor directly to Eike. What's happening in the Uffizi about this?
Well, in addition to preparing an exhibition together with Barbara, we also have prepared 2 other exhibitions. Actually, there was one exhibition that was going to open the day after our lockdown on Giovanna Garzoni, the great 17th century woman painter who was from the Marche region originally, just like Raphael was, and then was trained in Venice and worked in Rome and at several different courts in Italy, but she even traveled to London to work for the Royal Court of England, and she was really an artist sought after during her lifetime by all the great collectors, and the greatest collectors in the 17th century. Many of the greatest collectors in the 17th century happened to be members of the Medici family in Florence. So we also have a very strong part from our permanent collection in this exhibition. Now, we opened that exhibition on our reopening of the Pitti Palace, so it's on view there. It's an exhibition that we organized together with the Medici Archive project. It's based on years and years of archival research, especially. And in a similar way, the next exhibition that we're going to be opening in a few weeks' time is also based on years of research, but not just scholarly research, but also criminological research, because the subject is medieval illuminated manuscripts from monasteries and churches in Tuscany and in Umbria in central Italy, which were at some point stolen and then recovered by the special police forces for cultural heritage, the famous TPC command of the Carabinieri. So we've been working together with the Carabinieri as well as with the University of Florence, where there's one department whose chair is specialized in medieval illuminated manuscripts, to put this exhibition on. We have, however, slowed down our exhibition schedule for the fall and postponed some exhibitions into 2021 and into 2022 even. We will be adding some smaller, more focused exhibitions which start from works in our own storage or works from regional collections in order to be able to have additional scholarship to show that to our visitors, especially our return visitors, because this is the period where return visitors become more and more important, and we hope to keep them just as we are so far keeping our audience on our social media channels and on the web. So the numbers are not down, although we're reopening. the same way we are trying to intensify our relationship with those visitors who come regularly to the museum. In fact, I would say it's not just about maximizing the numbers, it's really about building new relationships with those people who are already passionate about our collections, but also diversifying the audience. This is very important. We've been doing that over the past few years already through exhibitions just as Islamic art in Florence and several other exhibitions. We put on the first exhibition ever, I think, of an African artist, not just an African European or African American artist, Tesfaye Urgessa from Ethiopia, and we're continuing in that vein as well. And I think it's really important to think about quality and not just quantity.
Perfect. Thank you, Eike. Kewin, in the National Gallery of Washington, of course, there is no entrance fee. So when we talk about maximizing, in this case, we are actually meaning if you actually, as a leading of this huge museum, can have an impact on the tourist itself and not the other way around. Kewin? Maybe let's double check if she's here.
Here we go.
Sorry, I mute protesters. Like the other panelists, we're thinking a lot about our local audience and knowing that we will have fewer tourists. And I have to say the institution has always had this sort of healthy tension between local and national and international. And I think the staff and I are really excited about having a greater focus on local. We also have seen great chaos in our exhibition program. I'm struck, of course, that one of the many things that has been unique about this crisis has been that it has hit museums all across the world simultaneously. So we're all trying to reschedule and juggle our exhibition schedules. We have just 2 weeks before we closed, we'd opened an exhibition about Degas at the Opera that we did with the Musée d'Orsay, and we'll be able to extend that. But I'm very sorry to say that we were supposed to open an exhibition last month, sort of the first time in America, a major exhibition about the Baroque in Genoa. And all of the artwork was supposed to be shipped from Italy just as Italy was closing down. So of course we had to postpone that exhibition. And so we're looking at probably not having any exhibitions between now and the end of the year besides the Degas show. And we're really thinking about that as an opportunity and how we might really think about our collection differently. I replaced a director who had been here for 26 years. So it's really a great time for me to work with the staff to think about new kinds of installations. We're getting ready to think about reinstalling all of our West Building Old Master collection. So we want to take advantage of the time to experiment and try some new things.
Thank you, Kewin. I want to turn to some of the questions that we're getting from our audience here, because there are a tremendous number of fantastic and very interested questions. I think there are two big categories of questions that people are interested in just scanning through. One is on a more logistical side of things. How are plans coming along to manage the various social distancing elements of getting our audiences back in? And we'll perhaps be able to get a little bit of real live thoughts from our friends in Italy and from Kewin, maybe what you are planning. And then the next category that a lot of people are asking about, which we'll cover perhaps in the remaining portion of our time, is what sort of permanent changes do we think are going to happen in this industry coming out of this crisis? And so we'll cover these two categories of questions from the audience in the next period here, but perhaps turning to the many different types of questions around social distancing planning. You know, questions around, are we going to enforce the wearing of masks? What are we learning so far in terms of social distancing measures? Even in these first few days, do they seem to be working well? Are there surprises perhaps in what you have done or what you are planning for in terms of managing the different aspects of the social experience of coming back to museums? So let's start with perhaps those who opened earlier. So I guess, Barbara, that would be you, and then Ike, and then we'll go to Kaywin.
Of course, as Kevin said, and even Ike, this is a time, that was a time of rethinking many things, many aspects, and of the organization and of the way to live and to present the museum. And so it's even a positive time just to slow down and have the time to rethink of several issues. For example, we reopen with groups of only 10 people per time, and this is an incredible number. I was fighting with the tour operators to arrive to a number of 25 each group, and they wanted to have 35 instead, and so we were fighting the kind of number of the entire group. Now, no way, for at least several months, hopefully, maybe forever, will be 10. The groups will be of only 10 people with a guide, and so will be even more the experience of the museum, if this situation will stay. So it will be much nicer, and so from a negative situation can arrive something very, very positive in terms of course, the economical aspect is another one, but there are issues and there are ideas of how to solve this other aspect. But even it might be work for more guide, because if you have a guide of every 10 people, a group of 10 people, you can hire more guides to have them. So not everything is negative. So there are many issues, and this time is really a time of and even the reopening and this slow down time. I'm calling, and I agree with Ike, that is a time like our grandparents' time, the kind of in these days. I was very happy to see the museums in a beautiful way, and people appreciate very much the visit. So little by little probably will increase, but I'm pretty sure we will never arrive back to how we were, and not everything is negative. So
No,
I'm positive.
Thank you. Ike, any surprises in your logistical planning in terms of reopening from the standpoint of social distancing strategy and enforcement and things like that?
For sure, but I think what one important point that Barbara mentioned is the smaller group sizes. This is something we've been working on for a while by introducing the fee for groups larger than 15 people. And in fact, we've seen that actually while some groups stay away from the museum, they're not interested anymore. And these are obviously not those groups that are driven by the potential visitors, but those that are driven by travel agencies that operate in a way that they see where they can send those groups before they bring them to lunch or into a mall where they can buy souvenirs or an outlet where they can buy any kind of merchandise. These, of course, often foreign groups. But we've also seen that, in fact, groups have split up into smaller groups. And that is not only very positive because there's more work for tour guides, but it's also very positive because the museum experience is much, much better if you have a smaller group. The tour guide can actually react to people's needs and wishes rather than just saying the same thing all over again. It's not a single channel, monodirectional communication, but true conversations start. So I'm very, very much in agreement with Barbara, hoping that this will be one aspect that will be remaining in place for the future to come, regardless of coronavirus. I think we will see also more individual visitors and smaller groups, groups that are shaped by the people who actually come rather than by a third party in the tourism industry, which I think is also a good and healthy thing. So that's the reason why I believe that providing them with additional online content that they can get through their cell phone is so crucial. And yes, if I think that the numbers will be growing rapidly, probably a few months after a vaccine will be found and rolled out. The Uffizis have been closed 4 times in the past century for the 2 wars. Then in 1966 after the flood, and then again in 1993 after the mafia bombing. And each time after that, after this long closure, the masses who came were even much bigger than before. So we also need to build a sort of wall to ensure that those people who just use the museum for purposes that are not really culturally valid are discouraged. Obviously, we don't want to put up a very difficult way to get into the museum. Again, it shouldn't become an elite experience again. On the contrary, we should be opening up more, but we should not be a platform for people just doing their own business in the museum that has nothing to do ultimately with a real cultural experience. And so I do think that in the end, a museum visit in 5 years from now or 10 years from now might be more like going to the opera, but it might also be more like going to a rock concert. It doesn't need to be the cultural model of the opera. But people will probably need to pre-plan in order to get there. I think it will be less possible with the much bigger numbers that are to be expected in future years, that people just can get the instant drive-in experience. So they say, oh yeah, let's just walk in there. So this is what people can now do and experience a new form that hopefully will stay. But with simply the capacities are limited, so we have to think about that.
Yeah, thank you. Kewin, it must be a monumental effort to plan for reopening, to think about all of the little details from the handling of tickets to what people are going to be doing with their hands to safety of the staff. It sounds like maybe a month away from reopening your doors. What advice and experience can you share with other museums and arts organizations who are looking forward now to hopefully at some point in the next month to 6 months being able to reopen, as to all of these logistical questions? What are you learning so far?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Of course, I mentioned earlier that we're just trying to learn as quickly as we can. There have been so many helpful webinars, of course, there's lots of great work that you can access online for advice about this. The American Institute of Architects has produced several really great guides for how to ensure safety in your office buildings, for example. We have also been working with an epidemiologist from the National Institute of Health, who's been helping us with the planning for the health and safety of both the staff and the visitors. So my advice is that there's lots out there to access. I find that really we're all saying pretty much the same thing, which is what we're experiencing when we go out to stores and other things, that there'll be as much, we'll have lots of signage telling people what's going on, and asking them about health conditions and suggesting they go home if they're not feeling 100% today. There'll be as many physical barriers as possible. So we will have, plexi shields for staff at the cash registers in the store, things like that. We will have signage to help people go through the building, like many museums, encouraging a one-way route so that you don't have people passing each other, particularly in doorways. We're going to close some of the galleries we have that are very small and are just difficult to maintain numbers. For our staff, we're going to ask them before any of them come in every day to look through a sort of questionnaire about all of their health and different symptoms of COVID. So a multi-pronged approach, but I think there's just so much great work that's been done out there, and we were accessing that and creating a robust plan for our institution.
Thank you, Edwin. I would like to ask now something that emerged from a research that, together with 3 students of our program, Valeria Bevilacqua, Gianmarco Modena, and Rebecca Roy, came out in a research in Italian cultural institution. That was mainly regarding the very role actually of the museum after the COVID-19, because another issue, for example, that came out from a question of the participant chat is that, as many of you said, that or it will take a lot of time to go back to the original number of visitors of last year, but more probably we will never go back to the same amount of number because the kind of visitor is changing, smaller group, and so on. How can we balance this with the fact that most of the time museums are depending a lot on the income coming from the ticket of the visitors? So actually the role of the museum is changing in the fact that obviously it needs to have more external support. What do you think about that, Eike?
Well, we earn more than 80% of our income from ticketing revenue. The other fields have also been growing, including donations from private sponsors, and these are mainly individuals rather than companies, because we don't have the same tax write-off laws in Italy such as they are in other countries. So it's more individuals who give to the museum, and we have an international network also for that. We have the Friends of the Uffizi here in Florence, but also the International Friends Group in Palm Beach, Florida, and they in turn have members from all over the United States and different countries as well. Now, that is certainly one that's very precious to have, and I know that the Vatican Museum has similar chapters all over the world. It won't be enough, though, to have that. And also, I think we have to strike a balance. Of course, we have to be very, very relevant to the local and regional population and the national population in order to justify any theoretical financing through taxes. I don't think this would be at this particular point very acceptable politically in Italy to propose raising taxes in order to finance the museums. It's the cultural ministry, in fact, I mean, has actually a very low percentage of the taxes overall that it's spending on culture. Anyways, it would certainly be great to add to that, but we're in a situation now, especially during COVID, and we will be remaining even the first few years after COVID, that doesn't allow for those theoretical experiments in the mind. The money simply isn't there, so we have to think about other sources of and other revenue streams.
And Barbara?
As I can mention, and I mentioned before, we we are financing the tiny state of the Vatican City State. So we, from our visitors, the income of our visitors goes not only to the running of the museums, but also to run the situation and all the maintenance of the tiny state. So it, for sure, it would be a problem. As you mentioned, we have a group of philanthropists that from 35 years, they are divided into 25 chapters in all over the world, from Asia to Europe, to different countries in Europe, and a lot of states in the United States and in South America that help us since 35 years to run specifically restoration projects, but in the last few years also other kinds of projects related to other issues. This is only devoted to the Vatican museums. But in another way, Pope Francis is asking us not to increase too much the ticket, the sum asked for the ticket, because of course we are the museums of the Pope, and we are the papal museums, and so we have to be accessible. It's really asking us to be open, and so maybe an issue can be to have people that can pay more, maybe pay a little more, and other categories, we are thinking of that, and other categories can pay less if they are not able. We already have a different kind of ticketing and prices related to students, they're related to families, and related to, and maybe we can work on that and maybe increase a little more if we will not arrive in the due time of the numbers of the pre-COVID numbers that we might think, and we are thinking of different strategies, and of course we are working a lot with our with the sensibilization of our patrons, and I also, like Kevin, did a lot of webinar and sharing ideas and having suggestion and even ask to help us. But it's a worldwide pandemic, it's a worldwide problem, and so it's not only our problem, and so it's more difficult to fundraise in this moment.
Kevin, the National Gallery of Washington is free, we said, and of course the situation is quite different, but we are quite interested in your perspective on this topic. To what extent should the support needs to come from something else rather than the visitors, as the museum is considered in a country an important public service and benefit that everybody needs to enjoy?
Yeah, we're confident of our continued federal funding. We also have a large endowment, although the endowment, of course, has been hit by the volatility of the stock market. So, for me, for the National Gallery financially, my concerns are that we watch the government now has gone deeper into debt with several trillions of dollars in support for people across the nation. And our concern is that perhaps it will be harder for us in future years for federal funding. But as I said before, we're really unique in America, and I really worry about my colleagues across the country. And the American Alliance of Museums has predicted that we might see 1/3 of the museums in America close because of this pandemic, and then the recession that we expect to continue for some time. So it is great concern, and I'd say that the majority of museum workers across America have either been furloughed or laid off. And we just grieve for our colleagues out there. It's going to be a very, very difficult time for American museums.
Thank you, Kevin. We can leave the last question to Chris, please.
I want to once again extract a series of questions that have come from the audience around the role of digital. And we could literally launch into a 2-hour continuation of this discussion. So I'm going to try to make it as succinct as possible, which will be unfair for our 3 panelists. Here's the question. Do you truly believe that digital can play a different role in the future for your museums? And specifically, do you see it playing a role in terms of increasing potential revenue streams? Kaywin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say that one of the greatest changes I think that will come out of this pandemic for museums is a new role for digital in arts and culture. And I think particularly for museums that we have traditionally seen digital as the sort of thing we had to do and that was on the side. And even when we report our metrics, we generally focus most on attendance and who's coming through the door. The digital's just been secondary. And I think what we'll see going forward is that digital is going to be just as important as the on-site visitation of museums. What I want to stress is they're different. So I'm not saying that digital will replace the on-site visit, but recognizing that they both offer different kinds of opportunities. I think we'll start now to get really serious about digital and enhance what we're doing. I have heard on some of the other webinars I've been on, some of my colleagues from other museums talk about ways to monetize digital. For example, one idea that I heard was that instead of having a company sponsor an exhibition, that they receive recognition, on the title wall of the exhibition, and we also put them, say, on our website, not the National Gallery, but other institutions, that we might actually sell digital sponsorships, so that a company might sponsor the digital portion of the Genoa exhibition and a different company sponsors the in-person experience. So that's not what the National Gallery will do, but I've heard other colleagues talking about that.
Great. Ike, will digital play a different role and will you make money from it?
Well, I think definitely digital has already changed the role of the museum very much so, and it has been doing so even more so in the last few months. So definitely yes. I think we have to think along those lines. I think oftentimes the potential of creating substantial revenue streams from digital are totally overestimated. We've run some numbers, and in fact, we were toying with some offers that we received, and it turned out that it wasn't worth it. The numbers that we would have gotten out of that would have been so low. So our policy remains that digital is free for everyone. In fact, I mean, we're loading a lot into the digital sphere every day, and also it's on different levels, especially because digital now plays a very important role in diversifying the audiences. And so there are different channels that are being used by different people, and therefore we would just lose them immediately again if we would charge money for that. Then also we are a research institution, and so in addition to digital, and to the museum objects, museum experience, I would want to mention paper also. We continue to publish books on paper. Every year, about 6,000 pages of printed pages of scholarly research and beautiful pictures as well. The idea is really to bring together the highest quality of scholarship with the most beautiful photographs and layout and precious paper. But then again, that is something one can make money from. I mean, not too much, but some for the digital offerings, which go parallel, we want to offer them for free.
Barbara, you get the last word on this question.
Before the COVID, 85% of our visitors were booking online. Nowadays, we only accept 100% only booking online. So everybody has to pass and register in our website to booking a ticket. So this is a way of creating even a database and affiliation of people, because they have to address, give an email address to be. And so we are strongly working on the digital, in the digital area. And even during the lockdown, apart from what was already done in terms of website, in terms of all the different aspects of our website, as I can mention, research and other issues, ebooks, or at least all our academic even works is now passing through the web, through the digital aspect. So of course, I do believe that the digital is the great winner of the COVID, as I mentioned. But at the meantime, I'm pretty sure, as Kevin said, that the real visit will never substitute the digital visit or virtual visit. So the virtual visit or the digital supports are very welcome to prepare the visit, to go in deep after the visit, or maybe for scholarly reasons, or for also educational purposes, but not will never substitute the real visit. In terms of having money or thinking of money, we are of course working on the e-commerce of our products and other issues. And so of course I agree that is a challenge of the near future, but we are working in that line.
Well, thank you, Barbara Iatta. Thank you, Kevin Feldman, and thank you, Heike Schmidt. It was a pleasure for Bocconi University, and I speak on behalf of it, hosting you and stimulating curiosity and questions from our audience that are that communicated a lot in our chat and wanted to present many questions that we could in some way grab and present to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the three of us. Chris?
And just to add my closing comments and thanks to everybody, I want to wish everybody good luck with the next few months. I know not just to our three panelists, but to everyone on this call as you proceed along this very complicated path. We've put up a poll here. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. If it was helpful, I feel like we could have gone twice as long and still gotten tons of questions. We will, as I said, to everybody who's registered to this webinar, send out not only the recording of the webinar, but also a summary and a link to some of the resources that were mentioned by Kewin and others, so that you have them accessible as well. We stand ready at the Advisory Board for the Arts to help you in any way you can. If you want to reach me with any questions, you can do so at chris.denby@advisoryarts.com. We are happy to provide our resources and help to any of you who are interested or just answer your questions. Once again, I cannot thank our three participants enough, three of the most esteemed leaders in this field. Thank you for taking time on the day that you were opening, on the day after you opened, and in such a busy time for us here in Washington. So thank you all. Thank you, Andrea, for this wonderful collaboration again, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you all.
Ciao a tutti, grazie ancora.
Bye.
Ciao, bye-bye.